get out. We're going to live together from today. We'll pay the rent of $500.
I was taken aback and my eyes widened. No, it's actually $1,000. But are you sure? However, I was grateful when my sister-in-law and her husband came to the house, full of energy, and told us that we could leave because they would pay the rent. Yes, please do. I thought it was impossible for my husband and me. Please live here with your in-laws. Saying that, I quickly began packing my belongings. Seeing me happily handing over the cohabitation with the in-laws to them, they were initially stunned, but soon rejoiced. I don't care what happens to them after this, but it's unlikely they'll be happy. My name is Emily. I'm a 29-year-old remote worker. Since last year, the company I work for has shifted to a remote work system, and I, holding a position in the company holding with most other employees, have been working remotely. However, this led to a terrible misunderstanding by my mother-in-law.
Hey, Emily, if you've become a full-time housewife, please do the housework for us too. My back has been hurting lately.
Due to strong insistence from Tom's parents, Tom and I started living in an apartment near where his parents lived right after we got married. But that was a mistake. Full-time housewife? Why would you think that? It's true that I've been at home ever since the company switched to a remote work system, but that doesn't mean I've become a full-time housewife. No, that's not the important part. I hadn't told my mother-in-law that I was always at home, not just because of the company's shift to remote work. The way I worked for the company hasn't changed from before. I didn't think I needed to report it to my in-laws living elsewhere. So I was very curious why my mother-in-law thought I was a full-time housewife. Then, looking troubled, my mother-in-law put her hand on her cheek and let out an exaggerated sigh.
Well, you see, you haven't left the house in over a month, right? So, I realized it. You must have been fired from your previous job and became a full-time housewife. It doesn't seem like you're going to the employment office either.
Haven't left the house in a month? At that time, my mother-in-law was pressing the apartment intercom repeatedly during the day, so I had to stop my work and reluctantly deal with her. I really wish she would stop coming around at this time. It's true that I switched to remote work a month ago, but how does my mother-in-law know that when we don't live together? I felt a chill at my mother-in-law's words. Her claims just don't make sense. How do you know I'm at home? Well, when you get to my age, you pick up on things. It's the wisdom of years. If she really could pick up on things, she wouldn't say something so rude like assuming I was fired and became a full-time housewife. I don't think someone who understands others would repeatedly ring the intercom in the middle of the day like this. Could it be? Have you been watching our apartment?
No, of course not. I was just worried about whether you were living properly.
My mother-in-law seemed flustered when I confronted her. It really seems like she was watching us. I instinctively put my hand on my forehead. The thought that she might have been watching us since we got married makes me feel nothing but creeped out by her. Does my husband Tom know about this? Tom and I share similar values, so he would surely find his mother's behavior creepy too. Mother-in-law, please, stop watching us. Also, I'm not a full-time housewife, so I can't do the housework at your place. Irritated by my words, my mother-in-law said,
I told you I'm not watching you. Stop talking about me like I'm doing something wrong. Besides, since you're always at home, it's no big deal for you to come over and do some housework, right?
She accused me of being idle despite watching our lives. Please, give it a rest. The reason I'm at home is that I'm working from here. I'm certainly not idle.
Then, why are we having tea so leisurely?
Because you kept pressing the intercom. If I didn't respond, you would have just stayed at the entrance, wouldn't you? My mother-in-law frowned even more at my words.
What do you mean? Don't make me out to be the villain. I was just worried about you.
Honestly, no one asked for her concern, and I truly wish she wouldn't think about unnecessary things. My mother-in-law left in a huff, saying,
You'll regret it if you treat me this way.
I resumed my delayed work due to my mother-in-law and told Tom about her visit and that we had been watched when he returned home.
Whoa, seriously? Have we been watched ever since we got married? Oh, that's creepy.
It seemed Tom and I shared the same thoughts. However, we couldn't think of a way to counter my mother-in-law. We had no plans to move to a new place yet. What should we do? As we were slowly considering our options, my mother-in-law made a drastic move. While I was out, she used the emergency key we gave her to enter our apartment and had movers take our things. She must have been watching us and realized we weren't home, then called the movers. When Tom and I returned, our furniture and belongings were gone from our home. Instead, there was a letter apparently left by my mother-in-law on the floor saying, "From today, you'll live at our house. Now, Emily can't talk back to me." Tom and I were stunned. If our furniture and belongings were at his parents' house, we reluctantly headed there. When we arrived at his parents' house, my mother-in-law welcomed us, while my father-in-law angrily said,
"What's this about suddenly living together? These things should be discussed first. I never thought you'd do something so unreasonable."
We argued that this cohabitation was initiated by my mother-in-law, but my father-in-law took her side, saying,
"Don't talk nonsense. You can't just make your mother out to be the villain. If you want to live here, you'll have to pay rent. Remember, this house is rented. Don't think living together will save you rent."
He misunderstood us as trying to vilify my mother-in-law and ordered us to pay rent. The rent was $1,000. I couldn't understand why we had to pay rent for a situation we hadn't desired. Our worries weren't just about the rent. Whenever Tom and I talked inside the house, my mother-in-law was always listening. Then she would use our private conversations as a topic at dinner or when the whole family gathered, saying things like,
"The two of you were talking about this when I was young."
She exposed our private conversations in front of my father-in-law somewhat mockingly. My father-in-law didn't say anything but occasionally snorted, making us feel uncomfortable. It was disheartening to realize how mean-spirited my in-laws were. My mother-in-law still didn't understand that I was working remotely, saying things like,
"I won't allow you to shut yourself in your room all day. You're going to clean all the windows in the house today."
She would thrust a rag at me right after breakfast. No matter how many times I said, "I'm working in my room," she would retort,
"You can't possibly work from home. Don't lie just because you want to take it easy. If you talk back again, I'll tell your father."
I started feeling, I can't take this anymore. I'm reaching my limit. Just then, a new troublemaker appeared before us. While my in-laws were away on a trip for a reunion, planning to leave the house empty, Tom and I were about to put our plans into action. That's when they arrived. It was Tom's biological sister, Catherine, and her husband, John. They came to the house at a time when Tom was absent and said,
"We're going to live here from today, so get out. We'll pay the rent of $500.
I was taken aback. "No, it's actually $1,000, but are you sure?" However, I thought it was quite fortunate that Catherine and John came to the house, eager to pay the rent and take over living with the in-laws. I decided to go along with it wholeheartedly. Yes, please do. I thought it was impossible for my husband and me. Please, Catherine and John, live here with your parents-in-law. Saying that, I quickly began packing my things. The sister-in-law and her husband were initially stunned, but soon rejoiced at my willingness to let them live with the in-laws.
"Hooray! Living at home for just $500 in rent and getting financial support from Mom and Dad? Isn't this the best life?"
"Indeed. Great job, Catherine. Now we won't have to worry about finances for a while."
They were both pleased, but in reality the rent for this house is $1,000, and it's unlikely the parents-in-law would contribute financially. However, I said nothing. In our case, we were forced into cohabitation by my mother-in-law, but in Catherine and John's case, they voluntarily chose this. Thus, it's their responsibility. As I finished packing, I promptly left the house. Catherine, noticing this, asked,
"You're awfully well prepared. Did you know we were coming back to live at home?"
Regardless of her question, we had always intended to leave this house. Our move today was just timed to avoid my mother-in-law's interference. As for Catherine and John's situation, I knew nothing about it. However, they misunderstood, thinking I knew something, and had willingly given up the house for them, threatening,
"Don't you dare tell Mom and Dad the details. Just disappear from us."
Even without their urging, I was already leaving. They were quite impatient, it seems. And so I left my in-laws' house and headed to the new home. At the new home, Tom had already arrived and was unpacking. I had been cleaning the room as we used before moving. For Catherine and John, who came to take over living in the house, the timing might have been good. After all, when they told us to leave, we did so immediately, taking all our belongings and leaving the room clean. If they think this is good luck, they're in for a rude awakening soon. Sure enough, a month after we started living in our new home, I received several calls from Catherine. While I thought she finally realized the gravity of the situation when I answered the call, Catherine jumped straight to the point, exclaiming,
"I wasn't informed about this. Why is the rent different?"
I didn't understand why Catherine and John thought the rent for their parents' house was $500 instead of $1,000. However, after discussing it with Tom, we realized that perhaps the father-in-law thought we were each paying $500, making up the total of $1,000. In truth, I was paying the full rent of $1,000, while Tom saved his money for the new home. Our father-in-law probably didn't know how much each of us was contributing. Therefore, he mentioned $500 per person, and Catherine might have interpreted that as the family home's rent is $500, and so they moved in.
"We thought we could manage $500 between the two of us, but double that amount is impossible."
What? Can't you pay $1,000 even with both of you working? I was genuinely surprised. I thought two working adults could easily afford that amount.
"Both John and I just quit our previous jobs and are out of work. We don't have any money,"
she said hysterically. I wasn't aware that Catherine and John had quit their previous jobs. Oh, really?
"What do you mean by that? You know everything already."
Know what?
"About us paying spousal support because of divorce at our last workplace. John and I both cheated, but we reconciled after realizing we were both at fault. But the spouses of our partners are demanding spousal support from both of us."
Isn't that to be expected?
"Moreover, the affairs were with colleagues, so it caused unpleasant rumors at the office. That's why we quit."
While I thought this was a case of reaping what one sows, I realized that Catherine thought I knew about these details. When they pushed me out of the house, she said something like this, and I seem to recall a relative of mine working at the company Catherine was employed at. So Catherine mistakenly believed that I was aware of their resignation from the company. They also wanted me not to say anything because it would cause trouble if their in-laws knew they both had quit their jobs. Well, I didn't know anything about it.
"Anyway, give us $1,000.
What? The conversation shifted abruptly from the story of their job loss to asking for money, leaving me to exclaim in bewilderment. Why should we, who have stopped living with my in-laws, have to pay the $1,000 rent for their house? It doesn't make sense at all. I absolutely do not want to pay. No way. Well, why should we have to?
"You guys were paying it before, so continue paying it. I heard you moved without saying anything to Dad. It's a nuisance fee. A nuisance fee. Hurry up and pay."
We never wanted to live with my in-laws in the first place. We were forced into it because of my mother-in-law. And now to be told to pay even after we've escaped from there is unimaginable. Absolutely not. Why should we pay after escaping a cohabitation that was forced upon us by my mother-in-law?
"What? Unwillingly? Mom and Dad said you guys came over on your own."
Oh, you didn't know? That was all my mother-in-law's selfishness. She was always watching us because we lived nearby, and when I started remote work and stopped going out, she insisted I do the housework at her place, saying I must be free. When I refused, she moved our stuff to her house without asking.
"What? She was watching you? And Mom moved your stuff? So the cohabitation was really Mom's idea?"
I've been saying that all along, haven't I? Thankfully, Catherine seemed to understand that remote work was a legitimate job and didn't think of me as a non-working housewife like my mother-in-law or father-in-law did. However, this meant that we were merely troubled by my mother-in-law, while Catherine and John were the truly unreasonable ones for moving in without consulting anyone.
So you guys kept living at home, and I thought moving out suddenly would somehow be forgiven."
There's no way Dad would forgive that. Even when we said it was Mom's doing, he didn't believe us and demanded we pay the full rent if we caused any trouble.
"Anyway, tell Dad we can't pay the rent. He might not have been nice to you, but I'm his real daughter. I think he'll indulge me no matter what," she said before hanging up. I thought to myself, I doubt that's going to happen. Sure enough, after a while, Catherine contacted me again, saying, "Tell me the address of where you guys are living. I'm planning to live there from tomorrow."
What happened?
"Dad told me to leave. It's all your fault for making us think that we could live there without any issues."
I can't understand why we were being blamed for this, but it was clear that Catherine was quite desperate. Perhaps her father-in-law, who likes to punish others based on his beliefs without listening to them, demanded rent from Catherine and John for moving in without permission.
We can't pay $1,000. John is so stressed out being watched by my mother-in-law every day. He's getting thinner.
It seems that my mother-in-law has now shifted her watchful behavior from us to Catherine and John. It's a relief to know that her behavior towards us has stopped now that she has someone else nearby to watch.
Hey, please, we can't go on like this. John says he'll divorce me if we don't leave the house. I'll be single at this rate, so let us stay with you.
I hesitated with a but my answer was already decided. That's impossible.
Why not?
You said you have no money, right? Then you can't come to us. Do you have money for a plane ticket and moving expenses?
A plane? Wait, you're not in the US?
Looks like you can't come. So let's end this discussion. Excuse me then.
Wait, we're really in trouble. Tom has blocked me too. Please help us.
I hung up without saying anything and blocked Catherine. Though I mentioned a plane, we are not abroad. Actually, Tom was transferred to a branch in Alaska, so I accompanied him. We haven't told the in-laws about this. I don't want to be watched or forced to move again. As for Catherine and John, it seems they are heading for divorce. John produced a doctor's certificate stating he developed neurosis from my mother-in-law's stalking and surveillance, leading to a claim for damages against her. This has finally made my father-in-law start to doubt my mother-in-law. John left the house and Catherine blamed her divorce on her parents. My father-in-law started suspecting my mother-in-law, who kept insisting she wasn't wrong, leading to a noisy situation at the in-laws' house. They received daily complaints from neighbors. Unable to pay the rent and losing trust in the family, my father-in-law stated he won't pay either, leading them all towards being kicked out of the house. As for us, we are living freely in Alaska, without being watched by anyone, and having blocked all contacts from that family, completely disconnected from them.